Hello, everybody, and welcome to Watch the Tower Radio's first ever broadcast. I'm David, and I'll be your host. I am very excited to be doing this program. I've been wanting to do something like this for a very long time, and I feel that now is the time. So, since it's being the first broadcast and all, I'm going to be talking about what this program, Watch the Tower, is going to be discussing, covering, and a bit about myself. Um, the main focus is going to be on cults, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Scientology, anything that I might see in the news that just strikes me as odd or weird, anything along those lines. Okay, a bit about myself. I was born and raised a Jehovah's Witness, and that's why I'm doing this. I got out in my early teenage years, and mostly I'm going to be talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, but I do want to cover other areas as well. So I'm going to go into my little story about what happened to me. My family is very, very deeply rooted into the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society, to the point where in the area where I live, my grandfather started the very first Spanish-speaking congregation. I still have many family members that work, or I don't know if you want to call it work, but that serve in New York, Bethel, as they call it, and some are even overseas doing the work. I got out, as I mentioned before earlier, in my teenage years due to some things I didn't agree with, such as false prophecies and whatnot. And this religion has torn my family apart to the point that we do not speak to each other anymore, and it's very saddening. And I know that some of you might have some similar experiences, so you know the type of pain that I'm feeling, and if you don't, it's not a very pleasant one. My mother is still kind of practicing, I guess you want to say, but now she celebrates Christmas, Thanksgiving, Mother's Day, most of the major holidays, and I don't question it. You know, I got some family members that do. I've learned from my experiences, do not challenge them, or they will go into their little inculcated teaching mode and just pretty much not listen to what you say. So, I'm going to go into the story in this broadcast about how I got out, and it's still like fresh into my mind this day, even though it happened to me when I was a teenager, and 15, 20 years later, here I am. Okay, so I remember me and my father really never got along. He kind of left for a great deal of my life, and then one day he came back. So instead of him, trying to reconcile or anything, the first thing he says to me is, David, I have something to tell you. Like, okay. He says the Jehovah's Witnesses are false, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, with my mind blown away, I haven't seen my father for years now, and this is the first thing he tells me, and I didn't really think about it too much at first. I said, Dad, whatever, and he's like, no, I really need you to hear me out. And I have so many questions running through my mind at the time. And the first one was, why'd you leave and everything. But we talked for a while, we kind of got that out of the way. I had a train of thought I wanted to do, and I said, Dad, let's talk about this first and we'll get to that. So when we got to that subject, he was telling me a lot of things that he read, and at first, if you're a witness, ex-witness, listening to this, or even a witness, you know how you're programmed to not hear such things. Anything is worldly or false. But for some reason, I just paid attention, and the thing that really got me is he didn't bring some outside source or publication to prove these points or facts. He brought me the actual brown volumes, what brown volumes are. I'm not for sure if they do this anymore, but I remember a long time ago, they would have like years, like 1978, 79, all the watchtowers and awakes, to this big literal brown volume. And I remember with everything just happened at that one time, I just couldn't process it all. I'm like, you know what, Dad, I can't take this right now. So I left home. And this was on my mind heavily because this wasn't made up. So I had a cousin at the time who was disfellowshipped, and I talked to him about it, and that didn't end too nicely because he ratted me out to the elders. And I think he did it just because he wanted to get back into the organization quicker. Because depending on how long you did fellowship or what you did, it could take some time. But anyways, I remember who I thought at the time was my friend. His name was Paul. And he came up to me, he's like, oh, I heard some things about you. And I said, well, yeah, I have these questions. And instead of talking to me about it, the first thing he asked me was, well, what privileges do you have? And I kind of looked at him with a dumbfounded look on my face. Here I am trying to find out facts, and they're asking me what privileges I had. At the time, I was known as an unbaptized publisher, which means I wasn't baptized, but I had the privilege, quote, the honor of going out in service and wasting my time and whatnot. So I told him, I gave talks, going out in service, and so forth. And he said, well, you can't do that no more. I'm like, okay, so I have these questions, and he stopped me dead in my tracks. He's like, you're going to meet with the elders, and you're going to talk all this over. So I said, okay. I believe about a week passed, and it was my mother and my stepfather at the time. And it was about 4 elders, and they put me in the middle of the room. And they had this weird, I don't know, they were almost transformed to something evil, I guess. And I had some really, really honest questions, because if it's the truth, I just hate saying that term, I'll tell you why later. If it's the truth, then there's nothing to hide. So I had all these questions about these false prophecies, these dates, and I brought their actual literature, nothing from written by an outside source. It was written by them. On the title was The Watchtower to Wait. And so when I opened to ask them, they would not even look at their own works, their own literature. All they did the entire time was poke and make fun of me. And I remember looking back to my mother and stepfather. My mom wasn't paying attention. She had her head kind of pointed down, and my stepfather was listening very eagerly, taking notes. He could see what was going on. And so after about an hour and a half of going back and forth, they wouldn't look at their work. They wouldn't look at their own Bible, and all they literally did was just make fun of me and belittle me. And I remember standing up and saying, listen, okay, this is going nowhere. You guys, 4 of these elders who are in their 50s, 60s, could not answer a 15, 16-year-old's questions to show that this organization is the truth. So I got them, I asked them one question. I said, listen, I want you to admit I am not an apostate towards the Bible, but only towards your organization. And they admitted that. And I looked back at my mother and I said, do you hear this? And of course she didn't, because, she was just shut her mind to everything. And so I remember this very vividly. About a week and a half, 2 weeks later, I was forced to go to the meeting still, and people were all nice, say, hey, how you doing? And I remember it was a Thursday night during, oh man, what was it called? They would have that little pamphlet what they'd read out of. Anyways, I remember they gave an announcement that, David is no longer an unbaptized publisher, and I will never forget the silence that fell over that room. Everybody put their head down. It's like I died. I'm like, I'm here still. And after that, nobody would talk to me, so it was pretty much being disfellowship, so I knew something was up. And I was done with that, because if something is truth, and I'm bringing what you wrote, what you're telling me here, what I'm supposed to invest my life into, and my money, and you can't even answer my questions, then there is something terribly wrong. And so that's what brought me to this today. To make a long story short, I didn't know what to do. I felt alone, so my dad introduced me to these people who were doing anti-cult ministries, and they really helped me out a lot. This guy, his name was Dan. He would write this pamphlet. Keep in mind, this is like before the whole internet boom. He'd write this pamphlet called the Revealer, and I remember like holding that thing like it was the Holy Grail and just reading through it. And we would meet once a month and talk about our experiences and the trials we're going through with ourselves and our family. And we did this for a long time, and I kind of fell out of it, and you know found a church and whatnot. I'll talk about that more later. But what I really want to talk about, or to kind of wrap up the program, is if something is truth, the truth shall set you free. And if you're gonna bring any publications, any books that are not the Bible and try to convince me or even you otherwise, you really shouldn't pay attention, because you know that the Bible is the only thing you need. And this organization has their own Bible, and they perverted it and twisted it to fit their needs. So after a long time, I'm actually really glad to share this experience. I've only shared this with a handful of people, but with the way you can get messages and communicate now, I feel that it's the time to do it, to kind of carry the torch for Dan on. He was a really, really cool guy and would go out of his way to help you. I actually went to my first Christian church, which was like, it's almost like entering the house of the devil, thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen here? Am I going to get possessed? How are these people? And I was greeted so warmly with so much love, and they're like, everything's going to be okay. And that's what I'm kind of here to do, and I hope there's other people here to do it. I'm going to be telling some of my experiences, just to share with people, maybe help somebody along the way. And I'm just going to be reading various articles, and like I said, if I catch anything and I'm like, oh wow, I really want to share, I'm going to. And along the way, I would love to read anybody's stories, anybody's experience about the trials and hardship they went through, whether it be Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Scientology, even Satanism, how you rose above it. And if you would allow me to, I would love to share your stories sometimes on this program, Watch the Tower Radio. And I'm going to put my email and Twitter into the description below. So please, I would love to read your stories, and I would love to share them. And if you do send email with these stories, please let me know if it's okay to share them, because I've been wanting to do this for a really long time and kind of not feel like I'm the only person alone that's experienced this type of thing, because I've only talked to a handful of people who've been through the similar things, and I know there's so many more people out there. And I remember hearing people how they commit suicide because they find out that they wasted their life, and I don't want people to do that. I had some really dark and deep thoughts at the time when I found out everything I believed in was wrong. So I'm hoping to maybe make some new friends along the way, and maybe one of my stories or experiences will help. So please leave your stories in the email. Feel free to say hi to me on Twitter. I really look forward to meeting you guys. Thank you for listening, and don't forget, the truth will set you free.